The life and mysterious disappearance of Richey Edwards. Richey Edwards was born on December 22, 1967, in Blackwood, Wales. He grew up in a working-class family, raised by his parents, Graham and Sherry Edwards, alongside his younger sister, Rachel. From an early age, Richey was highly intelligent, introverted, and deeply introspective. He had a strong academic streak, excelling in English literature and history, and developed a fascination with existential philosophy, poetry, and political theory. These influences would later shape the dark, poetic, and socially conscious lyrics he became known for. Richey attended Oakdale Comprehensive School, where he became close friends with James Dean Bradfield, Nicky Wire, and Sean Moore, the future members of Manic Street Preachers. After graduating, he pursued a degree in political history at Swansea University, where he wrote his dissertation on the Spanish Civil War, reflecting his deep interest in political struggles. While at university, he remained connected with his childhood friends, who were forming a band. Though Richey was not initially a musician, he was instrumental in shaping their aesthetic and ideological direction. He became the band's lyricist, designer, and rhythm guitarist, though he was far more influential in writing than in playing. The Manic Street Preachers emerged in the late 1980s as a fiery, politically charged band with a blend of punk energy and glam rock flamboyance. They were outspoken, rebellious, and openly confrontational, with Richey at the center of their lyrical and visual identity. Unlike other bands that adopted a detached, ironic stance in the 1990s, the Manics were deadly serious about their message. Richey was especially known for his sharp intellect and uncompromising views, often discussing themes of alienation, self-destruction, consumerism, and political oppression. One of the most infamous moments of his career came in May 1991, after a gig at Norwich Arts Centre, when he was being interviewed by NME journalist Steve Lamacq. Lamacq questioned whether the band's punk ethos was genuine or just a pose. In response, Richey carved 4 real into his forearm with a razor blade, requiring 17 stitches. The act shocked the media and cemented his status as a troubled, tortured artist, drawing comparisons to figures like Ian Curtis of Joy Division and Kurt Cobain. It also reinforced the band's reputation as dangerous, unpredictable, and deeply sincere. Despite the band's growing success, Richey's mental health began to deteriorate rapidly. He suffered from severe depression, self-harm, alcoholism, and anorexia nervosa, which he openly discussed in interviews. He frequently expressed feelings of worthlessness and self-loathing, often quoting existentialist writers like Albert Camus and Jean-Paul Sartre. His struggles were deeply reflected in the band's 1994 album, The Holy Bible, widely regarded as his magnum opus. The album was harrowing, nihilistic, and deeply personal, tackling themes of fascism, suicide, self-mutilation, and eating disorders. Songs like 4 Stone 7 Pounds describe the slow descent into anorexia, while Yes graphically detailed prostitution and exploitation. His lyrics were stark, filled with violent and despairing imagery, and fans began to worry about his well-being. During this period, Richey's health deteriorated significantly. He weighed as little as 90 pounds, had extended hospital stays for self-inflicted injuries, and spent time in rehab clinics. Despite these struggles, he continued to perform with the band, though his presence on stage became increasingly withdrawn. On February 1, 1995, Richey Edwards disappeared without a trace. He had spent the previous 2 weeks in London, staying at the Embassy Hotel, preparing for the band's upcoming promotional trip to the United States. He had been quiet but seemingly stable, though those close to him later recalled that he seemed detached and melancholic. That morning, Richey left his hotel room at 7 a.m., leaving behind his passport, packed suitcase, and unused plane ticket. He drove away in his silver Vauxhall Cavalier and was last definitively seen in London. Over the next 2 weeks, he was reportedly spotted several times in his hometown of Newport, Wales. During this period, he made a series of unusual withdrawals from his bank account, taking out £200 a day, totaling around £2,800, a detail that suggested premeditation rather than impulsive action. On February 14, 1995, his car was discovered abandoned at the Severn View service station, near the Severn Bridge, a well-known suicide spot. The car had a dead battery and receipts indicating that it had been there for several days. This led many to assume that he had jumped from the bridge, though no body was ever found, and his credit cards, passport, and belongings remained untouched, with no definitive evidence of his death. Multiple theories emerged about what happened to Richey Edwards. The most widely accepted theory is that he took his own life by jumping from the Severn Bridge. Given his long history of depression, self-harm, and suicidal ideation, this seems plausible. However, the fact that no body was ever recovered leaves room for doubt. An alternative theory is that Richey deliberately faked his death and disappeared to start a new life. The pattern of his bank withdrawals, the abandonment of his car without a clear sign of distress, and unconfirmed sightings have led some to believe that he may still be alive. Alleged sightings have placed him in Goa, India, as well as in the Canary Islands and Fuerteventura, though none have ever been confirmed. Some believe he may have gone into hiding, possibly as a recluse or living under a new identity. Another theory suggests that he was murdered or met with foul play. However, no evidence of violence or struggle was ever found, and the condition of his car suggests that he left voluntarily. In 2008, after 13 years missing, Richey Edwards was legally declared dead at the request of his family. This was a heartbreaking decision, particularly for his sister Rachel, who has continued to push for more investigations into his case. Despite his disappearance, Richey's impact on music and culture remains profound. The Manic Street Preachers continued as a trio, but they never replaced him. His lyrics, many of which were left unused at the time of his disappearance, were later incorporated into albums like Journal for Plague Lovers, 2009. His influence can be seen in bands that followed, and his status as a cult figure in rock history remains firmly intact. To this day, Richey Edwards' disappearance is one of the greatest unsolved mysteries in rock history. His fans, friends, and family remain divided over what really happened that day in 1995, whether he is truly gone or living somewhere in anonymity. His haunting words and enigmatic presence continue to inspire and intrigue music lovers across generations. Bison Dele, the NBA star who vanished without a trace. Bison Dele was born Brian Carson Williams on April 6, 1969, in Fresno, California. He was the son of Eugene "Gene" Williams, a singer for the legendary Motown group The Platters, and Patricia Phillips, a dedicated homemaker. His parents' relationship was often rocky, leading to their divorce when Brian was young. He and his older brother, Kevin Williams, later known as Miles DeBord, were raised primarily by their mother, moving frequently throughout their childhood. From an early age, Brian displayed extraordinary athletic ability. Despite suffering from asthma and anxiety, he pushed himself to excel in sports, particularly basketball. However, he also showed signs of being introspective, creative, and different from his peers. He had a deep love for music, philosophy, and literature, showing an intellectual curiosity that set him apart from many athletes. While other kids dreamed of NBA fame, Brian was just as interested in exploring the world, understanding different cultures and questioning societal norms. Brian attended Bishop Gorman High School in Las Vegas, where he quickly became one of the most dominant basketball players in the region. His combination of size, 6 feet 10 inches, speed, and skill made him a standout on the court, earning the attention of top college recruiters. After graduating, he accepted a scholarship to the University of Maryland, where he played for 1 season before transferring to the University of Arizona. At Arizona, he developed into a true NBA prospect, averaging 14.7 points and 7.8 rebounds per game in his final season. Despite struggling with injuries and periods of self-doubt, he declared for the 1991 NBA draft and was selected 10th overall by the Orlando Magic. His professional basketball career was officially underway. Brian's NBA career was both successful and complicated. Over the course of 8 seasons, he played for the Orlando Magic, Denver Nuggets, Los Angeles Clippers, Chicago Bulls, and Detroit Pistons. While never a superstar, he was a strong, dependable big man who could rebound, defend, and score efficiently. He became particularly valuable for his ability to play both center and power forward, giving teams flexibility in their lineups. However, he was never fully comfortable in the NBA world. He saw the league as a place filled with ego, materialism, and corporate greed, and he found it difficult to fit in with the typical jock mentality. Teammates and reporters described him as intelligent, deep-thinking, and at times reclusive. Unlike most NBA players, Brian was more likely to be found reading poetry, discussing philosophy, or playing the saxophone than engaging in typical locker room banter. His biggest moment came in 1997 when he joined the Chicago Bulls late in the season as a backup center. Playing alongside Michael Jordan, Scottie Pippen, and Dennis Rodman, he contributed solid minutes in the playoffs, helping the Bulls secure their 5th NBA championship. Despite his contributions, the Bulls did not re-sign him, and he later joined the Detroit Pistons on a 5-year, $36 million contract. However, Brian Williams' relationship with basketball was always tenuous. After just 2 seasons with Detroit, he made a shocking decision. He retired from the NBA at the age of 30, walking away from millions of dollars and a thriving career. After leaving basketball, Brian Williams changed his name to Bison Dele in 1998. The name reflected his desire to reconnect with his heritage, as he claimed to have Native American, Cherokee, and African ancestry. The name change symbolized his rejection of his old life, marking the beginning of a journey toward freedom, adventure, and self-discovery. Bison sold most of his possessions and set off on a global odyssey. He traveled to places like Lebanon, Australia, the Mediterranean, and the South Pacific, immersing himself in different cultures. He learned to fly planes, played the saxophone, and developed a passion for sailing. Unlike many former athletes who struggle with life after sports, Bison embraced his newfound freedom, seemingly content with his decision to leave fame behind. Despite his adventurous lifestyle, those close to him noted that he was still a deeply complex and sometimes troubled person. He was known to have bouts of intense introspection, and at times he would disappear for weeks without telling anyone where he was going. He was also known to have a complicated relationship with his older brother, Miles DeBoard. Kevin Williams. In the early 2002, Bison Dele had been living in Tahiti, embracing a carefree and isolated lifestyle. He had purchased a 55-foot catamaran named the Hakuna Matata, on which he planned to sail across the Pacific Ocean. In July, he set sail from Papeete, Tahiti, accompanied by Serena Carlin, his longtime girlfriend, a free-spirited woman who shared his love for adventure. Miles Dele, his estranged older brother, who had a history of financial and personal struggles, often living in Bison's shadow. Bertrand Saldo, a professional boat captain hired to help navigate the journey. The group set off with no sign of distress, but over the next few weeks, they vanished without a trace. No one heard from them again, and their boat never returned to port. The first clue that something was wrong came in August 2002 when authorities discovered that Miles Dele had arrived in Tahiti, alone, sailing Bison's boat. Even more suspicious, Miles had begun using Bison's credit cards and forged his signature to withdraw large sums of money, including an attempt to purchase $152,000 in gold. When questioned by authorities, Miles gave conflicting and vague statements about what had happened on the boat. However, as suspicions grew, he fled to Mexico, making it increasingly clear that something terrible had occurred. According to one of the final statements he gave before his death, Miles claimed that a fight broke out between Bison and Serena Carlin on board, and Serena was accidentally killed. The boat captain, Bertrand Saldo, wanted to alert authorities, which led to another fight. Bison and Miles struggled, and Miles killed Bison in self-defense before panicking. Fearing the consequence, he threw all three bodies overboard, leaving no physical evidence of the crime. Before authorities could take him into custody, Miles Dele overdosed on insulin in Mexico on September 2002. He fell into a coma and died, taking the truth of what happened aboard the Hakuna Matata with him. With no surviving witnesses, no bodies, and no clear evidence, the case went cold. To this day, the bodies of Bison Dele, Serena Carlin, and Bertrand Saldo have never been found, and the case remains one of the most mysterious disappearances in sports history. Many theories exist, but without physical evidence, the full truth may never be known. Bison Dele's story remains one of the most haunting tragedies in sports. He was a man who walked away from fame, fortune, and expectations to seek something deeper, only to vanish under mysterious and violent circumstance. Whether he was betrayed by his homeowner, caught in an accident, or the victim of a premeditated scheme, his fate is one of the great unsolved mysteries of modern sports. Jim Sullivan, the musician who vanished without a trace. Jim Sullivan was born James Anthony Sullivan on August 13, 1940, in San Diego, California, raised in a large Irish-American family. He grew up with a deep love for music and storytelling, heavily influenced by the folk and country traditions of the American West. From a young age, Jim showed an exceptional ear for music, teaching himself to play the guitar and developing a rich, resonant singing voice. Despite his passion for music, he also had a talent for sports, particularly basketball, which he played during his high school years. After graduating, Jim briefly attended San Diego State University, but his heart was always in music. He soon married Barbara "Bunny" Sullivan, and the couple moved to Los Angeles in the 1960s, hoping to build a better future. While Bunny worked to support the family, Jim pursued his musical dreams, trying to break into the bustling folk and rock music scene that defined LA during the decade. Los Angeles in the 1960s was a hub for aspiring musicians, and Jim quickly found himself immersed in the city's vibrant music scene. He played in various clubs and bars, frequently performing at the Raft, a well-known hangout spot for musicians, actors, and artists. His deep, haunting voice and cosmic poetic songwriting made him stand out from the typical folk singers of the time. He also befriended movie industry insiders, which helped him land a minor role as an extra in the 1900 film Easy Rider. Despite his talent, Jim struggled to gain widespread recognition. The LA music scene was highly competitive, And while many of his peers, such as Jackson Browne, the Eagles, and James Taylor found fame, Jim remained largely unknown outside of niche circles. His songs, often infused with themes of existentialism, loneliness, and the cosmos, were considered ahead of their time and didn't fit the commercial mold of the late 60s. In 1916, Jim Sullivan recorded and released his debut album, UFO, an eerie, psychedelic folk rock record that blended his folk roots with haunting orchestration and otherworldly themes. The album was produced by Al Dobbs and released on a small independent label called Monty Records. The lyrics of UFO were strangely prophetic, as many songs explored themes of disappearing, traveling into the unknown, and alien abduction. Tracks like Highway, So Natural, and UFOs describe a man leaving behind his old life, journeying through the desert, and encountering something beyond human comprehension. The album failed to gain commercial success at the time, but in later decades, it developed a cult following, with fans drawn to both its haunting sound and its connection to Jim's real-life disappearance, disillusionment, and decision to leave L.A. By the early 1970s, Jim was deeply frustrated with his lack of success. He had tried to make it in Los Angeles for over a decade, but fame remained elusive. Meanwhile, he struggled to support his wife and son, leading to increased tension at home. Friends described him as a charismatic but restless individual, someone who never felt quite at home in the world. In March 1975, at the age of 35, Jim made the fateful decision to leave Los Angeles and travel to Nashville, Tennessee in search of a fresh start. He hoped that Nashville's country and folk music scene would be more receptive to his style. With only his guitar, a suitcase, and a small amount of money, he set off alone in his Volkswagen Beetle, heading east. Jim Sullivan was last seen on March 6, 1970, near Santa Rosa, New Mexico, a small desert town along Interstate 40. The details of his disappearance remain one of the most chilling mysteries in music history. According to reports, Jim checked into the La Mesa Motel in Santa Rosa, but never actually slept there. Instead, he left his belongings, including his guitar, inside the motel room and drove away. His car was later found abandoned about 26 miles away, near a remote ranch. Inside the car, police found his wallet, ID, cash, clothes, and an unsent letter to his wife, but there was no sign of Jim himself. Local ranchers claim to have seen Jim walking away from the car into the desert, but no one knows what happened next. He simply vanished without a trace. Theories and speculation in Jim Sullivan's disappearance has spawned numerous theories, but none have been proven. The most common explanations include: he got lost and perished in the desert. Some believe Jim, disoriented and possibly under the influence of alcohol or drugs, wandered too far into the desert and succumbed to the elements. However, extensive searches of the area turned up no body, no bones, and no clothing. He met with foul play. Another theory suggests that Jim may have encountered the wrong people while hitchhiking or seeking help, leading to his murder. Hitchhiking or seeking help, leading to his murder and disposal of his body. However, there is no known motive, and no suspects were ever identified. He staged his disappearance. Some speculate that Jim, frustrated with his failing music career and personal struggles, deliberately walked away from his life and started anew under a different identity. However, those who knew him doubt he would have left his beloved guitar behind. Alien abduction. Given the themes in his music, particularly the lyrics in UFO, some conspiracy theorists have entertained the idea that Jim was abducted by extraterrestrials. While there is no real evidence to support this, it remains a widely discussed aspect of the case. Unsolved mystery and legacy. Jim Sullivan's disappearance remains one of the most perplexing unsolved cases in music history. Despite occasional leads and continued interest from investigators, no remains, no confirmed sightings, and no answers have ever surfaced. His wife and son were left without closure, and to this day, his family and fans continue to wonder what truly happened in the New Mexico desert that night. In the years following his disappearance, Jim Sullivan's music gained a cult following, especially after UFO was reissued in the 2000s. Fans and music historians praised the album's haunting beauty and eerie foreshadowing of his fate. Today, he is considered an underground legend, admired not just for his music, but for the mystery that surrounds him. Though Jim Sullivan never achieved fame in his lifetime, his disappearance cemented his legacy, making him one of the most intriguing figures in rock and folk history. Whether he died in the desert, fell victim to foul play, or truly crossed over into the unknown, his story continues to captivate those who discover his music. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed the video, please make sure to leave a like, comment, and subscribe.